So Trudi, welcome. For those that don't know Trudi, Trudi's I'm going to get all these letters right, I hope, an IAABC and an ABTC certified equine behaviour consultant. So Trudi, I know you've done your BHS exams in the past, and then in 2018 you formalised your behavioural credentials and got your certification through IAABC and the ABTC. Gosh, I made myself say it twice. And now you're a trainer and behaviour consultant, offering lots of in-person visits to clients locally and workshops throughout the UK, helping people to train their horses and understand them better. So we're delighted to have you back at the Horse Tribe for the second webinar, this time talking about problem solving using clicker training. And we were just chatting before we opened up the webinar to everyone. I'm saying I'm very excited to learn how to use clicker training to help my new ponies stand a little bit more solidly at the mounting block. So hopefully we'll be covering that. So Trudi, I'll stop sharing my screen. Before we do so though, just to say a couple of tech things. Folks, if you want to ask questions, please ask them as soon as they come into your head. But if you could use a Q&A function rather than the chat function, that'll just help Thea and I to ask those questions of Trudi at the end. Also, if you need to change the size of the slides, then you can just move that little grey line so you can see either more of Trudi or more of the slides. And as always, we'll be recording the webinar and it will be available at some point over the weekend for you to watch on demand as many times as you like. Have I covered everything?
I think so. Absolutely. Very efficient. So without further ado, Trudi, over to you. And I'm going to be making some notes in the background.
Brilliant. That's lovely. And if there's anything else that you think would be better answered straight away, do butt in. You know, if there's a big burning question, you think, oh, it'd probably be better to answer this now.
Will do.
I'm very easy on that. Hello, everybody. Anyway, it's really lovely to have you join, whether you're live or whether you're watching this recorded. I'm just going to share my screen with you. I will share my sound, although most of my videos don't have a lot in the way of sound on them purposely, because often I'm recording clients and friends as we go, and there's often a lot of background noise, so frustratingly, because it sometimes means that you don't get to hear the actual clicker bit of it, but I'll talk you through things. So we're looking more at problem solving tonight. That's going to be involving me talking a little bit about riding as well. Those of you who saw the previous one, you don't need to know any more about me. And of course, that was a lovely intro. Thank you. And you didn't have to say it twice, but yeah, those letters. And so we're going to have a look at using a clicker to create a solid weight for mounting. Actually, as well, I'll let you in on a little secret there. It's a great way to create a solid weight, whether you're using clicker training or not, because what I'm going to do is try and break it down systematically for you. But I'm going to show you how you could use clicker or positive reinforcement to help that. But yeah, you could apply it with very carefully applied negative reinforcement as well. And the question that I'm asked an awful lot, which is, can I really use a clicker when I'm riding? And those of you who are already clicker trainers, you know you can. But for those of you who are unaware whether you can or can't, yeah, absolutely you can. So we'll have a little look at the basics of that. And I want to talk a little bit about shaping. Again, I'm going to be looking at positive reinforcement, but you should be able to shape anything that you're training with your horse. It's a technique that covers positive and negative. So, basically having a look at problem solving is the overarching theme of this evening. I'm just going to go back very quickly for those of you who are watching who have maybe seen me talk before about clicker training. Tonight's a little bit different, as it was the first one, because I'm talking to a slightly different audience. Often when I'm talking about clicker training, I'm going to be talking to an audience that are already heavily invested and know all the science, and they know all the letters that go with everything, and the way that we talk about things like learning theory that we have here. So this is just a brief reminder after the first talk about why learning theory matters. And of course, learning theory sounds like it's a theory. Why would I need to know about that? I learn all I need to learn. I don't need to know the science about how I learn. But it's important when we're training horses, because it develops or helps us to develop a communication system when we understand that all animals learn the same way that we do. It's just that when we're dealing with horses, dogs, cats, any other animal, we haven't got a common actual verbal language. So we have to look at things differently. And learning theory is just a way that animals have learned to adapt to their environments. Us too, but when we're looking at a horse, they're looking at how they can use their behavior to adapt to an environment. So we normally say we have a cue for a behavior, the behavior happens, and we follow it with a consequence. And that means that the behavior is more or less likely to happen again in the future. And if we think about it in terms of a horse banging the stable door, and what do they get for banging the stable door? Maybe they get attention or food. And we can think of the cue, which could be all sorts of things. Often it can be the groom going into the feed room, and that starts off that cacophony that you might have around the yard of one horse banging the door, the other one turning circles, something biting things, running their teeth along the metal. But that will be cued, that banging the stable door will be cued by a behavior, which is normally the point at which the horse thinks the food's coming. And of course they keep getting paid, the food comes eventually, so they think it was a behavior well worth adapting, and so that's what we're looking at tonight. And again, just this is a repeat of the slide, but just very briefly, we're looking at positive reinforcement where we add something pleasant after that behavior. So if we thought about that consequence, it's a nice consequence. So for me right now, I've got a cup of tea, which is a pleasant thing, and I'm very often going to be positively reinforced with a cup of tea, or a nice cup of coffee if I'm out and getting a coffee shop coffee, or maybe a piece of cake, or maybe for you it's a glass of wine. But it's something that is added that makes that behavior likely to be repeated again. And if you remember, with horses we're a little bit limited, as they haven't yet taken to wine. We're really stuck with food, or potentially scratches or touching, which can be, I wouldn't say equally as reinforcing. It really depends on your learner. Every learner is different. So if you remember, when we look at clicker training, we're using learning theory in a way to reinforce the horse for a behavior that it's offered. And all the click does is form this lovely bridge between itself and the food, which is helpful, because especially as you're going to find out tonight, if I'm sat on top of the horse, how am I going to tell the horse that it's going to get some food, and what behavior was it that it got the food for? So the click gives us that moment in time where we can say, oh, that was what I liked. So it's just useful. Now, if we just take food out of our pocket and give it to our horse willy-nilly, it's still nice for the horse, but the horse will be looking to find a pattern. What was it that got me that food? Just like it thinks that banging the stable door got it the food when it was coming anyway. It doesn't know that. It's not a human. It can't work that out. It thinks that because it banged the door, eventually the food came. So that is going to always maintain that behavior. So when we want to mark a behavior, because clicking is what we refer to as marking, so it's marking that moment in time. Sometimes that might be a behavior that the horse will offer, like a walk or a halt or a backup. But sometimes it's something that we might do whilst the horse stands calmly, which is what we're going to have a look at a little bit tonight, which is standing still at the mounting block. So we have to think about the horse standing there for a period of time while we do something, which is slightly different. So I want to look at a case study, and I'm now wishing that I'd spoken to Thea and Heidi, and I could have actually worked through a real one for you. But the idea of this would be, and I would say this is high on my list of cases that I get in behaviour terms and training terms, although I don't think people think when they get on and the horse is halfway down the yard before they've managed to swing their right leg over, I don't think people actually see that they're having a problem, but it's one of them that we have to address. I think it only gets to be a big problem when people can't actually get on. That moment when the horse just keeps walking away from the mounting block, and you bring it back round again and it walks off again, or it swings its bum out. And so we've all been there. When my daughter was a tiny baby, I used to leave her in bed with Dad on the case, and I would go and ride my then 5-year-old, and I think I took about 6 months to get him to actually stand and get on. calmly, and it was, yeah, very frustrating, but yeah, so we've all been there. So what I want to look at before I show you how we might address this with clicker training, I want to burst a big bubble and say that clicker training cannot solve everything. No training can solve everything. And I want a couple of slides just to show you why we can't just go in and train it away. Now, it doesn't matter whether you go to see Monty Roberts, Pat Pirelli, somebody like me who works more with the science of behaviour. It doesn't matter. None of us can literally just train away a behaviour we don't want. And when we think of the horse moving when they're mounting, we're mounting, that's the behavior that we want the horse not to move, but the behavior that we don't like is the horse moving. I've just described it. They either shoot forwards, or they don't quite come far enough to get your foot in the stirrup, or they're that, you know, that leaning away and you're trying to reach across, and you know you shouldn't be, because it's really dangerous leaning across over that mounted block. We were talking before you guys joined us, and Heidi's got rather an unbalanced mounting block. You know the type where you're on the top and it's like, I've got to get on now because it's going to fall over if I don't. So what's the function of that behavior for the horse, that it doesn't want to come to the mounting block, or it moves before you can get your foot in the stirrup? Why? What's the function? What does that bring for the horse? Well, of course, it means that the rider doesn't mount. So what is the function of that behavior not being mounted? Why does the horse not want to be mounted? And I think there's only two reasons, and it's actually a lot deeper than that, but there are two things for me that really, really hit the nail on the head with this. And one is a lack of communication. Maybe your horse doesn't actually understand how close to the mounting block it needs to stand, how long it needs to stand for. And things like that we can train. We can totally train those. But the other reason is always a little more sinister, and that is because it doesn't like what happens when the rider's on. Now, that could be for a couple of main reasons, mainly pain or discomfort and fear. And I know we all hate to think that our horses might be in some sort of pain, but honestly, in my work, sadly, I would say 9 times out of 10 at the beginning, we need to get the horse some attention first. And these are not uncaring owners. These are owners that just haven't understood what a big part pain can play in when they're riding their horses. So I just want to get that across to you. I can clicker train my heart out day in, day out. But if your horse is not wanting to be ridden because of either of those things, because it's fearful of what happens afterwards, if it's fearful of going away from its mates, if it's fearful of going out for a hack where there's a steep hill on the way home, up or down, that it feels is really uncomfortable for its feet, any of those sorts of things, if the saddle's uncomfortable, when you lower your weight into the saddle, if that, you know, impinges in some way on their spine, if they have a kissing spine, then you can't train that away. And it frustrates me when I see things on Facebook with big guys wearing lots of protection and saying you just got to tough it out. All you do then is get a shut down horse that then comes back to somebody like me, who is a female who's not going to be able to be as tough as that guy, and you can often have big problems. So you need to find the function of why your horse doesn't want to be mounted. And you know, I probably can't go into the whys and wherefores completely of that, but I think most of us have got a pretty good idea why our horse might not want to be mounted. And you know, maybe sometimes just getting somebody else to have a look at it, even if it's on video, I think can be really useful. So when I look at the order of how I'm going to train something, the first thing I'm looking at is the history. Has this horse always had a problem going to the mounting block? I take a full history from the client and I want to know, how has this horse got to this place? Was it sudden? Has it always had this slight problem? You know, you hear people talking about horses with cold backs, which always slightly concerns me. Has this always been the case for this horse? And if it is, then I'm going to be a lot better informed when I start looking at how I'm going to train the mounting block, or even whether I should be riding that horse there and then. I've got outlined in red health and welfare. I am never ever going to carry out any behavior changing technique or training technique if my horse hasn't got the best health and welfare. So if I know that that horse has been checked out, and frustratingly, I find myself going back to vets again and again with clients, and they get frustrated as well. But normally we find something eventually. If you dig far enough, you do find things that are causing problems for horses. So the horse needs to be free from pain. They need to be able to live their best life as a horse. They need to be out. They need to have company, as my lovely colleague Lauren Fraser always says, friends, forage and freedom. They need all of that. And that's going to set the scene for your horse to have the best chance to want to leave home under saddle, to want to go into the arena and trot circles for you. If you can tick some more boxes in the health and welfare, you know, if you can add some enrichment to your horse's life, incredibly, it makes such a difference to the riding, to the training. And honestly, often all I need to go in and do with a client is just rejig a few things, a little bit more turnout time, some friends, the right friends to be turned out with, the right diet, the right amount of forage. It matters such a lot. And then there are a couple of techniques that I'm not going to talk about tonight, obviously, because I would be here for a lot longer than an hour, and I'm going to try hard not to go over that. Something called a constructional technique, and you will have heard of systematic desensitization and counter conditioning, I'm sure, but those are more behavioral techniques that we might use to change a horse's perception of the mounting block. So if the horse is frightened from previous experience, if Heidi gets up on her mounting block and just as she's to put her right leg over into the saddle, the mounting block gives way and there's a big bang and she's flat on her back, she's fine, gets up, gets a cup of tea, but the horse is like, oh my goodness, I've just had this terribly traumatic experience, and then doesn't want to go near to a mounting block again. These are the sort of techniques I would use then. I'm not going to go in with clicker training, but assuming that my horse is well, that he's been passed as not having any pain, and it's just a training situation, then I'm always going to go for positive reinforcement clicker training. So in our case study, I've cheated and I said that we already know that not only does the horse not stand at the mounting block, but he is pain-free. We've been through a lot of pain investigations and the horse is now pain-free. I think it's very hard to be able to say that. I always, you know, there's a caveat with that. The vet has passed this horse as pain-free. That doesn't mean he's pain-free, but, you know, you have to have a point at which you can start again. His welfare is as excellent as it can be for the yard that he's kept at, perhaps, you know, because we can't be perfect. None of us can be perfect. We do our very best by our horses all the time. And I've used my protocols to reduce the fear that Heidi being on her back, you know, gave her horse concern. So now they will approach the mounting block and walk past it and don't go, oh my goodness, there's a dragon. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in. So I'm going to use positive reinforcement, clicker training. Yeah, there's all sorts of names that you will hear people using, bridge training, force-free. I'm not so keen on force-free. I mean, I don't want to force a horse to do anything. Even if I was using gentle negative reinforcement, I would not be forcing my horse to do it unless it was life or death. You know, if there's a tractor coming around the corner and we've got to get in a gateway, I'm afraid we have to get in the gateway. It's really important. So we're using positive reinforcement. If you remember, I mentioned we have a cue followed by a behaviour, we hope we do, and the consequence. And the consequence with positive reinforcement will be something that the horse wants. So in the situation of the mounting block, you'll be perhaps surprised to hear that I don't take the horse anywhere near the mounting block to start that behaviour. I know, and it's a hard one because people just see the problem. I don't know whether you've seen that wonderful video where there's a woman with a nail banged into her forehead and she's trying to talk to, I don't know whether it's meant to be her boss or a boyfriend or a friend, and she's trying to talk to him about this headache that she's got, and he just keeps telling her, but you've got that in your head. And the whole point is to try and say that just because something is really obvious on the outside, don't pick on that. Don't pick that low-hanging fruit, because it's not always the best way to go. So just because this behaviour involves the mounting block doesn't mean you shoot straight to the mounting block and climb up it and go, oh, here, horsey. And the other thing that people do, which is really counterintuitive for me, but wouldn't be for most people, is they let them go up and have a good sniff of it, and they might put food on it, which is fine in the desensitizing stages where the horse has got to come to a point where it's not frightened of the mounting block. But once you want to mount the horse at the mounting block, it's really important that the horse understands the relationship it needs to have with the mounting block, and sniffing it is not how I'm going to get on. I'm going to get on by the horse lining up in a certain way. So if I've got, as we've got here between the two poles with one of my clients, Jenny, if we've got a fairly straight lineup, I don't need the poles, but we've used the poles so that we can describe another way to do this if you're struggling. If your horse is one of those that moves its bottom out when you get to the mounting block, then this is a really good technique for you. But this is also a great way to train a standstill. And so the poles just start to give the horse some idea of where it needs to be in time and space. You can use a map. You can see in the photograph on the right hand side, there's some blocks on their side and there's a map. Again, it's just giving the horse an idea of where it needs to be. So we will teach the horse to stand still, and when it's standing still, we'll click and feed it. And we will gradually add in us moving about a bit. So Jenny would move a little and then she'd come click while she stood away, and then she'll come back in and feed. We can have a look shortly at a very short video of that happening. So here I'm changing the context. We can see the mounting block on the left hand side there. But I haven't, in fact, we're completely the opposite side of the mounting block to that she's going to get on eventually. And again, I'm not going to rush to the mounting block. Horses love patterns. They love rhythms. You notice your horses like the rhythm of their life. And when you try and change it, they get a little bit, oh, that I don't understand that. Why did they think that changed? Because I wasn't expecting it to. So when I introduce change, like I'm going to need you to stand at the mounting block, I'm going to move it near to the mounting block. You know, this has been previously scary. It isn't anymore, but it previously was scary. So I'm not going to bring the horse bang in front of it. Now, if you've got a horse that stands for England, stands like, you know, forever and ever and never moves, you can cut these stages out. You don't have to go through every single stage. And there you'll see in situ. So she feeds him after she clicks with her tongue, and you see her gradually edging a little bit away from him and feeding him. And he knows his job is just to stand there and wait. And you see she gradually, this is called shaping, we'll talk more later, she gradually moves further and further away. But I would also say that you should just do short bursts like that. So she's going to take Travis off, walk him around and bring him back in. Because although mounting block is about standing still, it's also about coming in, standing still from a walk. So, you know, it's thinking about all those things that is going to be really helpful for you. Plan it, you know, think about what it is you actually want to do in terms of your mounting. Is it, you know, going to be always at a static mounting block, or are there different places that you might want to get on? If you're likely to want to get on a gate halfway round on a hack or a log or something, then, you know, you need to plan differently than you might be if you're always going to get on in the school. So eventually we get to a point where we gradually would move the poles away, or in this case where I'm going to be getting onto Fletcher, we come to a place that he understands where to stand, and I can stand on the top of the mounting block and I can feed him, and he doesn't feel like he needs to move away. And again, we start to shape the mounting procedure. Here's one of my lovely clients, Becky, and she is starting on the lowest step and she's touching a horse's saddle. It's no big deal. But those are the sort of things you should do. What I often see is people take it too far in the first attempt. They are tapping the saddle, leaning over, tapping the saddle again, playing with the stirrup, tightening the girth a bit. And in the first session, it's just too much for the horse. And of course, with our clicker, we can have our hand on the top of the saddle there, click either with our tongue or with our finger clicker, and the horse knows that it was actually the moment of us touching the saddle that he got the click for. We don't have to be near his face to pump the food in quickly, because that click gives us the time and space that we need. And there again, that's Becky with another one of her horses, and we're just going that next stage. She stood on the very top of the mounting block, and she's actually got two hands on the saddle, and she's just putting a little bit of weight from her hands down into the saddle. And your horse will be different. If your horse has never had any pain, never had an ill-fitting saddle, and it's not a baby, but you're still having fidgeting at the mounting block, then you probably don't have to do too much of this. You treat your horse as an individual. That's what's really important. And then we start to put our foot in, and very easy to say how to shape that, because you'll have seen it so many times with young horses when people show how to mount a young horse. No different when you've got a clicker trained horse. The only difference is that you click for the moment that you like. Okay, so here we've got a little video of Becky with the first horse we saw her with, and you hopefully can hear the sound on this one. So she's clicking the moment that she is happy with the behavior that he offers, but notice that she doesn't do too many. She doesn't go mad. She doesn't keep him standing there for a long time, because that's really going to get frustrating for the horse. It doesn't matter whether you're using food or not, but standing still next to something that you've had a problem with previously and offering a behavior like standing completely still, which you've had a problem with previously. You can't go from 0 to 100 in one session. You need to just do this very gradually. And that's the same whether you're using positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. And here's the lovely Sarah, and we slightly differently, because I wanted to show you some different ways of doing things. Sarah doesn't have an arena to work in. I'm sure lots of people don't have arenas to work in, and they're like, well, that's all right if you've got a horse and you've got poles. And we did this the same way, but we used the line of the hose pipe and some cones to give the mare an idea of where she needed to stand. And to begin with, we didn't use food. So this one's quite interesting, because this one is just scratching. So you'll see that she leans over and just scratches. Again, she leans over, and then you'll see that she starts to scratch. Maybe don't let go of your reins. I mean, this mare had not been mounted at this point. She's a real sweetheart, and you're going to say to me, but that's how I do it, but I'm not using positive reinforcement. The thing with clicker training and positive reinforcement training is it's the order. Remember that order of A, B, C. The antecedent or the cue comes first, and then the behavior, standing still, and then we lean over and put our behavior onto that, and then the scratch follows it. So what you often see is people scratching all the way through, and really we want to, with learning theory, and this is operant learning theory, to think about how the horse gets that reinforcer. It's after the behavior that you wanted. So scratching is great. I mean, I recommend scratching, but only if you have a horse that really enjoys being scratched. So here, sorry, that's the same one. Here we go. Here's the second one, and just very slightly differently as we shape the behavior and gradually get Jess to a point where we can put a foot into the stirrup and lean the weight over. And again, once the behavior has happened that she wants, we scratch. Again, I wouldn't recommend that you let go of your reins. And so she's rock solid standing there, because we've done a lot of stand still, get a scratch, stand still, get a scratch, not stand still and be scratched at the same time. Okay, I've got Heidi come on, so I'm going to guess that something.
We've got a question. We've got a question. As you said, it sort of fits now. So Devon's asked,
Brilliant.
I'm assuming that this training could take days or weeks. So I'm wondering, in the intervening period, would you continue to get on your horse using a mounting block, even if they were fidgeting, or would you just ignore the block completely outside of training sessions? That was going through my head too. So
yeah, that is a fantastic question. So good. And you know, I'm going to give two options for this. In my perfect world, yes, you would stop mounting in any way, because I think you would find it would go very, very quickly. In the real world, I often find that clients really want to carry on riding, and it's my job to try and make that as easy for them as possible, because that's what I'm there to make life better for their horse, but that sometimes means I need to make it better for them. So, you know, it's very, very tricky. Personally, I'd rather you didn't do it, or what I will say sometimes is do it somewhere different. Have a training mounting block, and have a mounting block. Here's often on a yard, there'll be one out in the yard for going out hacking. Use that one, or bring in a little portable one if you absolutely have to get on, is personally what I would do at that point. So yeah, definitely for me it would work better if you could leave riding off for a bit, but on the other hand, I know in the real world that often people want to carry on. So I hope that answers that. Do ask for more clarity if you want more.
perfect.
Okay, so then we've got here's the third one where we actually, and I wanted to show you this because I say Sarah doesn't have a yard. She doesn't even have a proper stable block. You can see the sort of conditions that she has to work in, and I often get people say, but I can't do that because I don't have all that stuff. Well, you know, I think where there's a will, there's a way, and Sarah definitely had a will. So this time, again, foot goes into the stirrup, she's on, and see how she takes her feet straight out, gets off, and this is slightly different now because look, she's going to take food from her pocket and give it to the horse. So we've now gone to feeding rather than just scratching. Why? Okay, I'll answer it so that you don't all have to write that in the Q&A. Why would we use scratches and not food? Well, this mare has a very sharp, we did use it the very first time we tried mounting, and she would turn around and snatch very quickly with her mouth with the food, and that's quite unnerving if you're standing leaning over a horse at a mounting block. I'm going to talk before we finish about how you could do that more calmly and introduce the food carefully, but this mare was really sort of keen and would sharply turn around and try and take the food. So it was much easier for Sarah to click while she was leaning over her or sat on her, and then get off and feed her. But Jess knew that what she was getting the click for was having Sarah on her back and standing calmly. And again, we'll see her now. This is sometime on, sorry, I pause it so you can hear me because there's quite a lot of windy stuff on this one. You can see the times have changed. We're into the summertime now, and we've really, I think, got to a point where the mounting is comfortable and everything's okay, and you'll see that process. And Sarah fed her at the end from her bag, and you could see that was very gentle the way her head came round. What often happens if their heads come round really sharply is the quarters get swiped out to the side, and if you're mounting a baby horse that's not been ridden before, that's quite disconcerting. What I wanted you to notice as well, by this point, we're not just clicking the moment the leg goes over. You'll see that in a video in a moment. But by now we have shaped the behaviour. So we don't just feed the moment we're on. Gradually we feed once we've got our feet in the stirrups properly, once we've done our girth up or checked that it's tight enough, once we've got ourselves, you know, comfortable in the saddle. And sometimes I might not click then until I've asked for a couple of steps of walk. No. But I will normally click at some point and feed around the mounting procedure, because we were talking about this before we got started tonight. For me, getting on and getting off is like the takeoff and landing in an aircraft. You know, those are the pinch points. They're the moments that are most dangerous. So really, I want those to be the times that I'm really feel that I've got the horse with me. So when we are going to be starting to use a clicker in the saddle, and particularly for mounting work, I want to practice feeding to the side when I'm on the ground. And this is what we did with Jess quite a lot, or Sarah did when I wasn't there. This was her homework. If you imagine when you do carrot stretches, I don't know whether you do them the same way I do, but I ask the horse to bend around me. So they're not just doing a quick, sharp sort of flick back with their head. So I will stand at the horse's shoulder facing forwards the same way as the horse, and I'll hold the carrot, or I do it with the target, out to the side so that the horse swings around and stretches around me. I will practice that from both sides on the ground, and gradually I'll start feeding the horse slightly higher and higher so that they get used to using those muscles to turn around and take the food from me. And of course, when you're feeding from the saddle, you lean forwards. You can't expect the horse to come around and come to you. That would be way above what a horse could manage to do. And I say that horses are so flexible, I'm sure some could. And then I'm going to practice when I'm leaning over the horse's back on the saddle. I will click and I will lean forwards and feed while I'm leaning over. And it's at that point that I'll decide whether I will use food going forwards and whether I ought to maybe just do scratches, because it's really hard for the horse to deal with. And I'll make sure that I lean and click over, I lean over the horse and click and feed on the opposite side, so right and left, because it's no good having a horse that only keeps bending to the left. You want them to be bending to the right as well, so that you get that opportunity for the horse to bend through both sides of its neck. And then I'll get on and I'll teach the horse that they can get a click when I'm sat on their back. And this is part of the problem. When we are on the ground, the horse associates you being on the ground with how they're going to get food, and then all of a sudden you're sitting on top and you click, and it's like a new world, and the horse is, oh, I'm very confused about this. So this is why I build it up gradually like this. In fact, I had one youngster that he was brilliant on the ground, walk, trot and canter, rein back, everything in place. And at about 4.5 years old, I got on him and I was on my own, which it used to be the case very often. And we just sat there and I used my cue to walk on. And he just stood there. He was so fazed by me actually being on him that he didn't know what on earth to do. So I had to go back and unpick a few bits and get somebody on the ground to help me with that a bit. Make sure you feed from both sides evenly when you're riding. And if you have got regular physio, I'm sure that they will talk you through why you should do things evenly pretty much on most things. And try to avoid your horse doing that sharp twist round, because that's not very good. It feels very uncomfortable for you, and I don't think it's great for the horse either. So here's a lovely little shot here. And that's really important. Add in picking up the reins.
Nothing worse than you get on a horse, the minute you touch the reins, they're like off. Either if they're in walk, they go to trot, or if you're getting on, they walk off.
And that was the first time that Katie had done that on her own, without her mum being the clicker trainer on the ground. And whenever Katie clicked, her mum had been feeding her. So it was really awesome to see that develop over a couple of clinics that I held at 9 Acres Centre in Norfolk. And every horse is different. Some horses find all this very easy and others find it more difficult, depending on, as I say, their past history and the way they're kept at that time. So that would be, sort of a nice flexible pony that can turn around and, as you can see, get the food easily from the saddle. This is just slightly different, and I wanted to show you this. If you remember when I mentioned about counter conditioning at the beginning of the webinar, and I said you probably heard about that. This is just slightly different to clicker training, and I want to explain to you why when you've had a little look at it. So I've taken the sound off so I can talk, but you notice I'm feeding, constantly feeding when Ali touches the saddle. She touches the saddle, I start feeding again. So it's not contingent on anything particularly that we do and the consequence following. It's just if Ali touches the saddle, I feed. Leg goes over again, I start feeding again, and she's on. This is something called counter conditioning, and the order of getting the food is very different to clicker training, and it's about training different pathways in the brain. So I just wanted to show you that so that you could see, even though it looks the same, we're just throwing food at the problem and it looks like, oh, you just throw food and it works. There is quite a lot of science behind it, that you do it in the right order, depending on what you're trying to do, whether a horse is fearful or whether you're trying to train and shape a new behavior with the horse. So when I'm riding with a clicker, my favorite would be this lovely clicker here. I think they're about £5 or £6 on Amazon, or one of the dog clicker training sites. There has been a ring clicker developed. I'm not a massive fan of it. It's quite quiet. These are quieter than the big box clickers that you might have seen dog trainers are initially training with. But I like this because the elastic means that you can wear it on your hand, inside your palm if you want to, so that you can press it with your thumb, but you can easily ride with your reins, so you could have this on the back of your hand and be riding and think, I'm going to do a few canter transitions that I want to click the result, off I go. So that's my tip for when we want to ride with the clicker, and it's about being comfortable. A lot of people tongue click. I don't know how good you are at tongue clicking. Yeah, mine's quite good enough, and I've got it with me. So, you're never going to be in one of those situations where you go, oh, I left my clicker at home. The good thing about a mechanical clicker, though, it always sounds the same. So it's never going to be you making some weird noise that doesn't sound quite right for your horse. Horses love patterns. I think I mentioned this earlier when we were talking about, horses banging doors and stuff. So whenever I'm riding, I'm thinking about patterns that I can create. Those of you who are clicker trainers that might be listening to this, you're going to say, isn't that a chain, Trudi? Yes, it's a chain. But when I'm talking about it in general terms to a less particularly minded, about clicker training group, I just talk about it in general terms of creating patterns. So everyone always knows, oh, well, when you click, the horse stops to get its food. Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm cantering, how's that going to work? Because otherwise my horse is just going to keep stopping every time I press my clicker. Yeah, good point. Well, the thing is, if you think about this little pattern here, I'm walking and I'm asking for a canter transition, and then maybe I'll ask for a halt transition. If I want my horse to get to the halt, it has to pass through the sausage machine of walking, cantering before I ask for the halt. And by marking or clicking the halt when I get a good halt, my canter improves incredibly. And also, right at the beginning, I don't mind marking, clicking that very first step of canter. So the horse goes, oh, it's this is what she wants. Click. Oh, wow, I got it. Before you know where you are, if you've got a horse that's not a canterer, not a walk to canter horse, they will be offering you canter like, oh, you want this? In fact, you'll have to explain to them that isn't what you want every single time that you're sat in the saddle. So the clicker, don't think about it just being used on the behavior that you want. You can create little chains where the click comes right at the end. The horse is then much more likely to go through the stages of the pattern because they know at the end comes that consequence. So it might be walk and trot transitions, it might be walk halt transitions, it doesn't matter. But you can just open your mind to the idea, lose the idea that you can't ever use a clicker for a canter transition, because you can. This is just a tiny pattern. Here's Becky with her baby horse, and she's just going to show the most basic pattern that I would do. Now, she normally works on her own, so it's really important that she feels safe. So let's just run that one. It's a very short pattern. So she will get on, ask for walk on, and you see how she has a mat, and he stands on the mat, and she will click, and she'll get off, and she'll feed him. And that's a really simple pattern with a baby horse. We could then have the mat much further away around the yard. We could have more mats. We could have a pole to stand by. We could have a pole to put front legs over, whatever. But creating those little patterns where the click comes at the end can be so, so helpful for you. And here we have a canter transition into a halt. Good boy. Good. And canter. Well done. Good. So there I was just asking, oops, let's pause that, sorry. Good. All I was asking for there was canter, and as he started to gather himself into the halt, I was clicking. I want to catch the moment at the beginning where the horse thinks it. So my aids start to suggest to the horse that I want them to come into a halt. And you know that moment where you know the halt's coming? It hasn't happened, but you know your horse has listened to you, that they've heard the cue. That's the moment at the beginning of the training of something new that I want to catch hold of. It's that moment. And that's why a clicker is fantastic, because you can, you know, in that moment when your seat feels perfect and you know the horse is going to halt, you can click and the horse is like, ah, that thought process that I had, that's the one she's after. It's like dynamite when that starts to get into you and your horse's brain. So I'm going to finish with a few ideas. Gone too far. I'm just having a quick check on time. Yeah, hopefully I'm not too far out. On shaping behaviour, if you recall, I mentioned that we can shape all behaviour, whether it's being trained by positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Shaping is just moulding of a behaviour. I find it quite hard sometimes with even good negative reinforcement, because fundamentally we start with touching the horse with our legs and the horse walks forward. But those of you who've trained young horses using negative reinforcement, pressure and release, will know that sometimes you touch your legs on the horse and nothing happens. And then you go, I better ask a bit more, not a lot happens. And then you ask that last time, that big one, and the horse shoots forward. And you've kind of gone through the first, 3 steps on my shaping plan, all in one go. So I find positive reinforcement a lot easier in that respect, because I can use my click to stop the behavior going too long. So remember, shaping is just that step-by-step process. I will write a shaping plan. There you've got, it would go on for, ages and ages, a plan. I might have 20, 30 steps that I might carry out over several sessions that I'm going to be training with the horse, and really straightforward. So my criteria are just the things that I'm going to work on in that session. And it might be, right at the, I work pretty much, in an organized way, but that means in future I could hop through a couple of those steps. So if I see that my horse is coming to a halt through canter, from canter into a halt really easily, I don't have to go 3 steps, 2 steps, 1 step. I can just go to number 4 and hold directly from the canter. If my horse is super balanced and I know he can do it, then I don't have to worry. But I will still write the shaping plan, because it's better to jump through the steps than it is to not have enough in there. And we've all been guilty of that. I know I have. And what I want you to think about as well with the mounting block is write yourself a shaping plan. Okay, I'm going to see if my horse stands away from the mounting block, nowhere near the mounting block. Yeah, cool, he stands. What about if I walk away to the side of the saddle, just like I would at the mounting block? Will he stand? No, he walks off. Oh, okay, that's going to be, it's difficult here. What's it going to be like when I get by the mounting block? So it's about having those steps all written into your program, rather than rushing through and just being like throwing things and seeing if they stick. So building up that list that you can hop through and miss pieces out if you really don't feel that you need them. So my top shaping tips are, well, there's loads, but these are the main ones. Choose those small steps, those criteria, as we will call them. Choose those small steps so that you can jump 3 or 4 if you needed to, but that if you don't need to, you haven't lost anything, that you could go through them systematically. Each time you're training in a sort of area of your training, so if I had, say, a 20-30 minute written training session, I'm not going to pick 10 different criteria and work on all of them. I'm not going to do, I'm going to work on a nice halt, I'm going to work on a nice rein back, and I'm going to work on a nice canter. I mean, yes, you could, once your horse is used to doing this, but to begin with, pick one criteria. I'm going to work on a halt transition, or I'm going to work on a canter transition. And when you've done that 20 repetitions or 5 repetitions or whatever you feel your horse's stage of training is at, then you have a breather, you put your horse onto a long rein, you give him a nice piece of food to say, right now we're just going to have a chill, and then you can come and work on something else. Once they're used to working in this way, then you probably could mix your criteria a little. When you change anything, so when you move your horse closer to the mounting block to practice the standing still and moving around them, when you change it, lower your expectations. You might be surprised, your horse might be perfect, but horses, as I say, love patterns. You change the pattern, the horse is like, that mounting block, I've never seen that mounting block. I don't know what you're talking about. Stand still? I can't stand still. That is how their brains work. It's not them being dumb. It's not them being a pain or an idiot or a jerk or any of those words that we hear bandied around about horses. It's just your horse struggling with the change of the pattern. End on a good note. You will often hear trainers talking about ending on good notes, but I have that caveat there. Sometimes just blinking get finished, because you can keep going. I've heard people say, oh, it took me 2 hours to get halt transition. Why? Why did you carry on? There's nothing good that comes out of training your horse for that long, because what happens in the end is that the law of averages, one time they'll get it right, but that doesn't mean they've learned anything. So yes, it's great to end on a good note, but clicker training, just the same as anything else, it gets a bit addictive. Sometimes you just have to say, end it now. Introduce difficulty, which might mean a new mounting block. It might mean training in a new arena. It might mean having some distractions around, like having when you go for your first dressage test and there's flowers and the little judges, it might be adding things gradually and adding duration, longer periods of time stood at the mounting block, but add them carefully. Don't just throw them all in. Oh, I've trained this dressage test, I know the dressage test inside out, now I'm going to go to Kiso and I'm going to ride the dressage test in a place where there's 4 arenas next to each other, and they've got horns to start with, and the judges are all in little boxes, and there are flowers everywhere. You're not going to do that and get away with it many times. Know the whole plan. Remember the shaping plan, all those little steps. Know the whole plan in case it goes well, because you might be able to skip forwards. But if you haven't written the whole thing out or planned it in your head, then you might trip at the first hurdle. And always identify your end goal before you start. Now, you might be laughing now and thinking, what does she mean? Of course I know what I want. You'd be surprised. What does it actually look like? What does mounting your horse look like for you? Is it toe in the stirrup, leg over, foot in the stirrup, walk off? Is it that plus lean down and check your girth? Is it that and then wriggle around a bit? Is it that and then walk away, turn around, see if your mate's ready and on board yet? What does it actually look like for you? Might it be, as I said, might it be getting on a log when you're out in the woods? It's important that you think about how that end product's going to look, and then you can work backwards in your shaping plan. Again, that's just about good training, but it's especially important with clicker training, because once you have the power of food and a click, you're at a place where it's really, really difficult sometimes to know whether you're guiding the training or the horse is guiding the training. Well, hopefully I haven't gone too far out of time, and there is room for questions if anybody would like to. Thank you very much for taking the time. If you want to find me, particularly you might like my podcast at Anchor, which is Lead a Horse to Water, where I talk a lot about this and a lot of other fun stuff as well. So yeah, do join me anytime on the podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Brilliant.
And thank you for listening anyway, guys.
Thanks, Trudi. And you're also on a Horse Tribe podcast as well, so lots of opportunities to listen to Trudi. Right, we've got a question from Devon again. So thinking about training something more general, like a backup, for example, would you differentiate between being in a training session with the clicker and normal handling? I ask as my horse is on full livery, so staff will naturally ask her to do things that I may also want to train to improve. So can she get confused by that? Good question.
It's a fantastic question, and what I think, Devon, and your previous question was really on it as well, and that's what I love, to be able to answer questions that make us think a little bit more closely. It's a problem a lot of people have. It's a frustrating one because you want to do everything your way, and then you know that people are going to be handling your horse and they'll do it differently. The one thing I'll say, that horses are really good at working out people, and I would say that whatever you do will remain that pattern, that special way of doing things, that you do things. Whereas when other people do it with them, then it will be a whole different ball game. We call it discrimination, where a horse can discriminate between things, places, people, and your horse will discriminate between what you ask and what the other people that are handling it are going to be asking of it. I actually have a colleague who has had a horse, I don't know whether she still does, that was at one of the riding colleges, and it was used for lessons in the riding college, and then she would take it and do clicker training, and I know it helped her horse immensely. And that's something that I would also add. If you do have your horse on full livery, or if you can't get to see your horse much and you know other people are doing a lot of things for your horse, 5 minutes teaching your horse to touch a target, to touch your fist for some food, it starts to develop those cognitive skills for your horse. There are lots of enrichment types things that we can do nowadays as well, which we never used to do. But that actually teaching your horse to have to do something like follow a target or follow your hand and get clicked for touching it. Things like carrot stretches, as I say, I don't do them with carrots. I do them either with my hand, that I want the horse to turn and touch my hand, or I'll do it with a target. So a target could be a 1 pound duster from Poundland, those extending things, and that's fine. Honestly, you can get some great ones. Like mine is a little red ball on the top of an extended stick. That's a dog training one, but it's something that you can have in your back pocket. So say you were out, maybe even hacking, you could use it from the saddle, but certainly in hand. If you get to a sticky place and the horse is like, oh, I'm not really sure about this, and you go, got my target in my pocket, can you touch the target? Yes, click and reinforce. Can you touch the target? Yes, click, reinforce. And the horse is like, this seems quite normal, this seems like stuff we do at home. And you just bring that anxiety level down a little bit, and they're starting to use their brain for something, rather than going, oh my god, there's something in the hedge that's going to eat me. So yeah, absolutely, I think you can add a lot to your horse for their benefit and your benefit, Devon, when you're not there all the time. But it's good fun for both of you as well. I think that's important to say. I think often doing these things, so teaching your horse to back up, can be clicking can be such an easy way to get that, because you just feel that moment where the horse braces up a little bit through the chest as if they're going to take a step, and you click. And you do that the second time, and that you can sense them thinking, it's just me going to take a step backwards. That's what I'm getting the click for. and off you go then, and you can put as many steps onto it as you want to. I'm making it sound very simple, and in a way it is very simple, but there are also, obviously, I would suggest that you perhaps invest in somebody giving you a hand with it, or reading some books. And there's loads of videos and podcasts, not just mine. There's lots of stuff out there. There never used to be. When I started this, it was very much try it and get it wrong and try it again, and yeah, so as with all things.
And that leads us in nicely, actually, that language, to a question from Claire. And Devon says, fantastic session. Thank you, by the way.
Oh, thanks, Devon.
So Claire has said, is there a risk of confusing the horse stroke making things worse, or should we just try the clicker and see how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, Claire, it'd be really nice to know what you're thinking about in terms of what specific behaviour, if you're thinking of mounting block. For me, number one is to think about the end bit of the equation, which is how the food comes after you've clicked. And that is the bit that you have to get super clean. And when I say clean, just like any sort of training, it's the mechanics being good. Like you've seen riders who are great at leg on, leg off, leg on, leg off. They're so seamless and smooth, and the horse isn't confused by having a feel on the rein and the leg clanking and not quite knowing where to go with itself. It's the same with clicker training. The horse needs to know how it's going to get the reinforcement, because it's very powerful. Having food and not knowing how to get it is like, ugh. So I never work with a horse that's hungry. Ever, ever, ever. You don't want to work with a horse that's hungry. Bring them in from the field, or let them have a big hay net before they start. I don't want it to be that's the only thing I get. I have trained horses with hay, clicker train them using hay, often with chaff. You don't want to go in with something super exciting. Yet other horses really like something tasty, so a nice chunky hay cob that takes a while to break down is ideal. And I always start with the bit where I go click and follow it with food, click and follow it with food. Now you can use a word, so you could use a word like yes, yep. It needs to be short and sharp, and it preferably doesn't want to be something that you use ordinarily. So a lot of you might not like tongue clicking, because you will click as a backup cue to walk on. So if you ask your horse to walk on with your leg, if it doesn't, you might try and get your horse to go forwards with the sort of clicky noise. So if you do that, you don't want to be popping that click in all the time, because the horses keep stopping and thinking, did I get a click? So you want your click to be different, but it doesn't have to be a click. You know, with say with some dogs it might be a whistle, it could be any sort of sound that stands out, is remarkable in the area that you're going to be working with your horse, but that doesn't terrify them. But number one is to build that cycle of, whenever I hear that click, I get food. Whenever I hear that click, I get food. And I never don't follow a click with food. Never. I shape the behavior, which is why I wanted to talk briefly about shaping. I shape the behavior afterwards, so that, you know, getting on might be to begin with lean over, click, feed, lean over, click, feed, and then gradually put my foot in the stirrup, click, feed, put my foot in the stirrup, leg over, click, feed. So I build up to the point that I'm on. So I'm always shaping. So for me, there's never a foodless click. They're always followed by food, because it's, to me, it's a contract with my horses. If you hear this noise, and it's brain, I mean, even me, when I'm in my car, if I accidentally grab my bag and I click my clicker as I'm picking it up, I get this wave of dopamine. You know, it's that for me, because a lot of my clients are clicking and it's a good moment for me. Hearing a click is like conditioned for me too, and that's how it should be for your horse. It should hear the click and know, oh, that means that's the exact same thing as getting food. So it's a lot more complex, and I would urge you to, you know, to delve deeper than I can in sort of 50 minutes, but it just gives you an idea of the sort of things that you can do. And I've completely forgotten where we were going with Claire's question.
Well, actually, Claire's added a little more information.
Oh, cool.
I'm curious about this too. So she said that the activity is canter transition. So it will be hard to deliver food when I get a good transition, unless you're pretty athletic. So what would you do in that situation?
Well, what I do with the canter transition, and what I've done with that little grey Iberian that I showed the video of, is to begin with, when I want the canter transition, I'll probably train it from the ground first. But even if I wasn't, it's that moment where you feel the horse, as I said before, like with the rein back, it's that moment where you know the horse is going to canter. And I don't even want it to take that first step. So if I'm trotting, then it will be from trot. If I'm walking, I train Iberians traditionally along, throughout my life. And so I'm often going to train a walk to canter before I'm even going to think about trot to canter. And it's that moment where you just feel that the energy is there and it's connected in their head, and then it's going to go to their legs to start that first step of canter. That's what I want to capture, not a step, not 2 steps, not 10 steps, because that isn't the act of a canter transition. A canter transition is very different to being in canter. So for me, I want it really to be that moment, and then again I'll shape it so that it's not just a feeling, but it's that organizing of the legs, and that moment where you get that lift from the back leg pushing up and you go, that's the one, and then they'll stop. But oh my goodness, the power that you then get from that. And then gradually, as I said, what I would do is I'd create patterns. So it would be walk, trot, canter, walk, and then I might halt and click for a lovely halt. But you've got to go through all those stages of the pattern of walk, trot and canter to get to the halt. So the horse is always looking at, what can I do next to get me closer to the reinforcement? If I stay here in walk, I'm not going to get it. So it changes the mindset of your horse to be looking forward. So these horses that are a little bit chilled, shall we say, the cob that often people think doesn't go, but they invariably they do. Once you light that touch paper and find it, they do. So those horses that are a little bit reluctant to go forwards, don't think, oh, I need to catch the trot. It's walk 2 steps, trot 1, halt, click the halt, because the horse has got to go through those other stages to get there. And that really gets them forward thinking, rather than sort of, oh God, not 10 more trot steps that I can't do. So yeah, hopefully that helps, Claire. If not, ask for more information.
Absolutely. I think it also links into Sue's question, which is what's the best way to ask for trot or canter? It's for a horse who's very energy conservative. So,
Well, yeah, that's a lot of people, and that's why I loved Iberians, because they tend to be much more forward thinking. But actually there's more joy, I think, in a forwards horse that wasn't previously forwards, for me, to create that forward nature. So again, really what I want to do to begin with is start to create a good walk, because what I find is that these horses don't have a good walk. They don't have a good halt to walk transition. Everything's a little bit manana, and it's all like, if I have to, I will. So I will ask for the walk from the halt, and I'll literally click again the second the horse is thinking walk. Not when it's in walk, but thinking walk, when it gathers its muscles to go, oh, I'm like, yeah, that's the moment. And I feed them and they go, what? I got to click for that? Oh, okay. And then I will shape on, and it will be that I actually want half a walk step, 1 walk step, 2 walk steps, and the same with the trot. You could use targets too. A lot of people love using targets where somebody will stand ahead, or you'll have a stationary target ahead and you'll teach the horse to move to that. But honestly, I would start a lot further back and work on the horse understanding the transitions, and maybe from the ground as well. Again, I could probably do 3 webinars just on getting forwards, and it's massively important, because you want the horse to be thinking for themselves. Not just chasing the food, but obviously it is all about them finding that food. And there are a lot of people that will use sort of devices like mats on the floor. You teach your horse to go to a mat, but it's very similar to the process of having walk, trot, halt, and marking the halt. You might have walk from one mat to another, and then ask the trot from one mat to the other, and the horse understanding the behavior in itself, they get more fired up, knowing that when they get to the next mat, they're going to get their food, and then it sort of drives the behavior forward. So think about anything that you can do to suck your horse through that little behavior pattern, and encourage that forward movement. And also, as I said earlier in the presentation, always be sure that your horse is really comfortable. Will your horse trot without you? Will your horse trot in the field? Will they trot out on the hack? And if they're not trotting in a certain place, or they're more conservative with their energy in a certain place, then start thinking about what I said about what's the function of them not wanting to do it. That there might be something that you could look at and find some answers there.
Fantastic. That's
And
brilliant.
Trudi, just a quick question about starting off young horses. So what would you recommend the first thing that you might just start with a young horse? I've got a 3-year-old gypsy cob. And for anyone who's got a young horse and they just want to start with this really positive reinforcement, what would it be? What would you start with?
Cool. Well, I would think, for me, first of all, I say I go to the end part of the equation and make sure that they really understand how the food is coming to them. I would do that in what we call protected contact, which I spoke about a little bit last time, where you will be one side of a gate or a fence or a pole across, you know, some blocks or something. That's not to keep you safe. It's not to stop your horse running you down to get to the food, although in some cases that might be true. It's really to give you space to be able to see your horse in front of you. If your horse is here going, you got the food, I love you, it's really, really hard. So you need to be able to create that space between you and the horse. And I would probably put my food in a container at my feet, and I will click and I'll bend down and I'll pass food to the horse, and then I'll let it eat. But before it finishes that mouthful, I will click again, I'll bend down and give it some more food. And I would do that many times so that the horse understands that that's how it's going to happen. You don't have to come to me. I will always find a way to bring the food to you. Because what I see most frustration around training with food is that the horse doesn't understand, you know, that grabbing pockets and I want to get the food. It's because they don't believe you, because sometimes you've given it a certain way and other times you've given it a different way. So if I'm going to introduce clicker training, number one, get that reinforcement bit perfect. And so the horse really knows, I can wait here, she'll be coming with the food. It's like, you know, takeaway, the takeaway comes to you, I'm bringing it, you know, in bed, you can sit there. And then very quickly, within 5 or 6 repetitions of that, you'll see the horse looking to offer you something. That's when I might start getting it target out, or asking, touch my hand, or I might ask, can I touch your ear, or can I touch your back, or can I do anything that is in your daily routine. I would want to start it with, you know, a yearling, ideally, so that they understand the principle of, I offer a behaviour and I get the click. That's the most important thing. And then after, you're cooking on gas, the same way that you would train using negative reinforcement is exactly the same. So we want those basic core cues. Can I walk? Can I halt? Can I stay halted? Which for me is a different cue, because I love that ability to ask a horse to wait, because you can punctuate it. I mean, if you remember the girl getting on the grey pony, she was constantly giving a cue of stand while she did something. It's what I would call a support cue, so that the horse has got more information to know what to do with itself when it's going to have a bit of a, oh my God, she's leaving me. So you can use those cues. And so it would be, I would want halting. I would be doing the mountain block with a yearling. I'm never going to get on, obviously, for years. But I would still be doing it. I might be up here, you're human, clicking and feeding you, or, you know, gates, opening gates and things like all the really basic stuff, stepping back. And I'd want to just, it will be different. It will look different for every person because of how they need their horse or pony to look. But I build those core behaviours that I need that are going to be useful. Being able to be tied up, because that's super useful as well. You know, a lot of people think that all us clicker trainers just do everything at in freedom, and that we don't expect our horses to be tied up. But you have to. It's a real world out there, and you have to develop your horse in all these skills. So it's literally walking your way through all of those things and having a bit of fun with it when they're babies, you know, not being too serious. But I cannot stress strongly enough, it's about the food and the click, or whatever you use as your bridge word, being strong, really tight, so your horse isn't constantly trying to get into a food bag. And once you've learned to do it from the floor, or I mean, when I do clinics, I do 2 people. So one person has the food, one person does the clicking. This is for new people to try it. And basically that prevents the person doing the food from fiddling with the food in between times, because they don't know when the click is going to occur, when the clicking person's going to click. And it just breaks down that cycle so that the person relaxes a bit with the food. You get quite stressful when you're doing something new and you're a bit of a beginner at it. And it is so important you don't give it away to the horse that I'm going to get food. It's click first, then get your food. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And it's just
Pleasure.
been a fabulously informative webinar again, which is amazing. Thank you so much, Trudi. I'm just going to quickly pop on the screen what we've got coming up in the next few weeks. So we're sort of back to our winter ways with 3 or 4 webinars every month. So next Thursday we've got Georgia Plymley coming in. She's done a webinar for us already around Liberty, but she's going to be drawing on her experience as a stunt rider next time and talking about how to stay safe and fall correctly. So given that one of the things that riders fear most is falling off, she's going to teach us how we can do that much more safely. And she's already shared some secrets with us, which is just incredible that we don't get taught it normally. Thursday the 29th, we've got Jason Webb coming back. I think it's his 3rd time, and he's going to be talking about solving clipping problems. I'm sure we could use clicker training as one of those methods. Then we've got Andrew Hemmings, October. He's a lecturer researcher at RAU, and someone who looks at the neuroscience of horses, so he's going to help us understand our horses' brains in a bit more detail. He's fascinating, and also really keen to make sure that everyday people understand the language he uses, so he's really clear in terms of how he communicates. And then 13th of October we've got Ali Wakelin coming back again. She's talking about some groundwork, her second groundwork webinar. This time concentrating on how to move sideways. So lots of different stuff coming up, which hopefully will excite and interest people. So thank you so much, Trudi. Once again, it's been brilliant.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon, and I think we'll all be having a go again this weekend at some of the tips. So thanks.
Absolutely. Take care. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.